kid, let's get ready for this morning's quiz. Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
In 1492.
Nice.
Christopher Columbus came upon the New World, and he saw that all the people there were living naked, and he immediately thought of them as inferior beings. He also noticed they were easily manipulated and would do what he asked. The record of the interactions between Europeans and the Native Americans included a lot of enslavement, murder, and rape put onto the natives. They were taken advantage of from the minute they appeared in history. When the Europeans arrived, they carried germs that thrived in dense, semi-urban populations. The native people of the Americas were effectively doomed. They had never experienced smallpox, measles, or flu before, and the viruses tore throughout the continent, killing an estimated 90% of Native Americans.
The French and Indian War started in 1754 to decide if Britain or France would take over and become the stronger power in North America. The war provided Britain with an enormous amount of territory. The war finally ended with the Treaty of Paris in 1763, but the cost of war put Britain into a large amount of debt. Britain and France were fighting a war over land that didn't belong to either of them, and the Native Americans had no say in what happened to their land. Later on, the American Revolution occurred, resulting in the colonists gaining what was to be known as the United States of America. But what happened to the Native Americans? The Native Americans tried fighting for their own independence, but it was almost always ineffective.
The Lewis and Clark expedition was a memorable part of history. Lewis and Clark were traveling across the U.S. soil to explore unknown territory and told the Native Americans that this was no longer their land, and their great father, Thomas Jefferson, was now the owner. Some encounters were peaceful, but others ended in armed battles such as Teton Sioux tribes.
The Trail of Tears was a series of forced relocations of approximately 60,000 Native Americans in the United States from their ancestral homes in the southeastern United States to areas to the west of the Mississippi River that had been designated as Indian Territory. It was named the Trail of Tears because of its devastating effects, as many that migrated did not make it all the way.
The government passed the Indian Appropriation Act in 1851, which created the Indian reservation system and funded moving the Indian tribes to farming reservations and keep them under control and out of the regular American citizen life. They were not allowed to even leave these reservations without permission.
In 1862, Congress passed the Homestead Act, making western lands belonging to many Indian nations available to non-Indian American settlers. This marked the beginning of mass migrations to Indian lands for non-Indian settlement.
The Battle of Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand, occurred in 1876 when gold was found on Native American land and tensions began to rise between white Americans and Native Americans. The U.S. Army ignored previous treaty agreements and invaded the Native American land. This betrayal led to a hatred of white Americans and a willingness to fight. This battle resulted in the most well-known Native American victory in history.
In the 1884 Supreme Court case Elk v. Wilkins, John Elk, a Native American-born man, wanted to leave his reservation and move to Nebraska with other American citizens, but faced problems when he tried to register to vote and could not. He took his case to court, and they eventually decided he would not be allowed to vote because he owed allegiance to his tribe. Even though he was a natural-born citizen of the United States, he was not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States when he was born. Therefore, he did not have the same rights as other citizens.
In 1887, the Dawes Act was passed by President Grover Cleveland to emphasize that Native Americans will be treated as individuals instead of just members of a tribe. It was an effort to get rid of the tribes entirely, as they were believed to be outdated and not up to par with the advancement of the rest of civilization. It authorized the president to separate the tribal landholdings, and this resulted in the tribes not being able to live in their traditional ways.
In the 1916 Supreme Court case United States v. Nice, the courts declared that Congress has complete and absolute power to protect Native American interests even when they are granted citizenship. Native Americans who were granted citizenship by the Dawes Act were the citizens of the state in which they were in at that time.
The Indian Citizenship Act of 1924 was passed granting citizenship to all Native Americans born in the territorial limits of the country. Previously, citizenship had been limited depending on what percentage Native American ancestry a person had, whether they were veterans or, if they were women, whether they were married to a U.S. citizen.
In 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson passed the Indian Civil Rights Act, which granted Native Americans many rights and benefits included in the Bill of Rights. It said that an Indian tribe cannot enforce or enact laws that go against an individual's civil rights and liberties.
Santa Clara v. Martinez in 1978, a Santa Clara woman married a Navajo, and the tribal council denied her children membership in the Santa Clara Pueblo, based upon a 1939 tribal ordinance that denied membership to children of women who married outside the tribe. The woman sued to grant membership to her children. The court held that Indian tribes are distinct, independent political communities, retaining their original natural rights in matters of self-government. In short, the court held that the court itself did not have the right to interfere in tribal self-government issues such as tribal membership. The Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians v. Holyfield in 1989 was a case that called attention to Native American children being separated from their tribes. This case protected Native American children from being adopted by non-Native families. The Supreme Court held that the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978 governed adoptions of Indian children. They hoped to stop the excessive removal of Native American children from their families and culture. This was a big milestone for Native American rights.
As for the 20th and 21st century Native Americans, many of their issues stem from the subjugation of Native Americans in society, including societal discrimination, racism, cultural appropriation through sports mascots and depictions in art. Native Americans have also been subject to substantial historical and intergenerational trauma that has resulted in significant public health issues like alcoholism and the risk of suicide. Many school and professional sports teams use Native American images as their mascot. These caricatures and stereotypes are harmful, perpetuate negative stereotypes of America's first people, and contribute to a disregard of the personhood of Native people. These mascots have serious psychological, social, and cultural consequences for Native Americans, especially the Native youth. The National Congress of American Indians have been working very hard to rid sports teams of these types of mascots and provide the indigenous people of our land with more respect.